Good afternoon, everybody. So I'll be up until later on this evening, right? So any question, we probably won't have a time now because I've got quite a few things to cover, right? But I'll be around to talk later on. So it's great to be back. I was sitting listening to Gary's keynote this morning. I realized that I was with my team here in 2009 presenting the first keynotes on cloud, right? So I was really, really early days, and at the time, if you remember, people could not spell cloud, right? So there was 101 definition of what cloud was. And it took us a good 7 to 8 years to get where we are. So I'm Gerald. Quick, on me. So we've been 18 years with the company now, right? At multiple roles, as you can imagine. More importantly, I've been focusing on the large enterprise for several years now, and I'm specialized on financial services. So I've been heading the financial services group, for the last 9 months now, and we're looking at the top 50 banks across Europe. And prior to that, I had a global role for financial services. So I spent some time in China and Australasia, and before that, I was running the large enterprise group for the European region. Right? So that's me. What I'm going to do, we've got quite a tight schedule. There's a few things I want to talk to you about this afternoon. I want to talk to you about Intel. How is Intel evolving with our new CEO and what's our strategy. I want also to make some observations of what we're seeing as a team, right, across the board. I'll try to refer to some of the comments that Gary made this morning during his keynote. And then I'll talk about, can define that maybe as IT strategies, or at least to get you thinking about IT strategies and what needs to be done in the next, couple of years, but also going into, 5 and up to 15 years horizons, right? So 15 years horizons is a bit more science fiction. There's an interesting concept there, but as you will see, I think they're very important especially when it comes to analytics, right, or data management and also infrastructure. So that's what we'll cover in the next 35 minutes. So Intel is evolving. We've got Brian, he's being our CEO now for, I think he joined in 2013, late 2013, right? So coming up to 4 years. And if you look at our CEO tenure, over the last 10 years, we had, before Brian, we had Paul. Paul was the first true marketer or commercial person, right, in the company. All the company has been engineering for many, many years. Paul was very much a commercial person, looking at, how we can develop technology and apply it, right, really to the user demand. What do you want to do with technology, right, and what do we need to build in terms of microprocessors or storage. Brian is a different view, right? We're back to engineering, right? Brian is an engineer at the core, right? And Brian, clearly his vision is how do we make as Intel, how do we embrace the Internet of Things, everything getting connected, right? So we've done a few strategic moves across the last 4 years, which I think position well for tomorrow's world, right? So that's our vision, right? If it's smart and connected, it run based on Intel. Think about Intel not only as microprocessors, but we'll do a lot of work as well on networking. And, we've got some great technologies coming out on the storage, actually new memory architectures, right? So, we work on multiple angles of the technology, right? And clearly our aim all the time is to drive innovation across the market and really pull the market, right? I always use the example when I joined Intel many years ago, we transitioned from the Pentium 2 to the Pentium 3. At the time, the feedback from the customers and the press was, why are you doing that, guys? Pentium 2 was just good enough as a microprocessor, right? When we moved from Pentium 3 to Pentium 4, we had the same discussion, right? And what we try to do is to work with companies like yours to, help you to test, develop, the new technology, the new business model, and how we move forward. So how does that apply to industries, right? So we've got a team, probably short of 1,000 people globally, that focus on specific verticals, right? So on my side, I focus on financial services. And some examples here are coming from financial services, you will see. But really what we look at, are what are the key business problems from specific industries and how we can apply the latest technologies and innovations to address these problems, right? So at the end of the day, what we get, beyond the CPUs, we're working with partners to develop some specific case studies, best practice, right? So we'll talk about regulation, compliance, how do you integrate your digital journey with your customers. And to do that, we work with multiple partners across industries, and MarkLogic has been a partner now, probably, I would say, 5-7 years easily, right? So we work very closely on the development of these solutions, right? So really looking at, again, industry-specific challenges and how the know-how and the expertise of MarkLogic, for example, in this case, apply to what Intel can bring in terms of technology performance and technology enhancements, how is that going to benefit, the customer. So here are some examples on just case studies and things we've done for financial services. So that's more addressing the business problem as such. But also we do back what Intel does best is how do we get and collaborate with the team at MarkLogic to get to optimize, their products, and also it's a two-way system, optimizing their products and also that, all development as well, right? So then you end up getting better delivery and better performance out of a solution. So, you can read the quote from Ciao Milani, right? So the improvement we've seen with the latest server infrastructures, both on compute and storage. And you can see on the graph of generation and generation, we collaborate, right, to improve the services. And that doesn't come, it's not only the, pure IT or technical performance. There's a lot of optimization done on the MarkLogic suite as well. Okay, so what's the top of mind when we cross across the industries, right? So just think about this group. We are, by verticals, and we engage from anything from the IT management teams to the board, and and everything in the middle, including line of business, right? And when we talk to our top customers, right? When we talk to the top analyst firms, which are generic but also specialized on some specific industries, like for example financial services, companies like Tab or Celent. And to a startup, we come, with very consistently with four key categories, right? Of top of mind for your boards and I guess yourself as well, right? So let me take off the security. Cybersecurity is everywhere, every single industries, every team's, very, very present, right? So this one is omnipresent, across the board. These three other categories are a bit more specific. The first one is compliance and regulation, which today are impacting, most industries, right? Of course, financial services, but that's also we spoke about government, healthcare. Take also the automotive now. How you're going to driverless, cars. The regulation and compliance put a lot of burden, on your enterprises and the industries generically. What's interesting here on compliance, if you take the example of the banks, a lot of the banks spend 50% plus of the IT spend now on compliance and regulation, right? And I think for us, interesting part of the discussions we're having with our customers is how do we turn that into just as a cost, how do we start to generate value from the investments being made on that part of the quadrant. Customer engagement is evolving very fast, probably faster than ever. Gary talked about technology evolving, but if you look at how, from a B2B and B2C perspective, people are a lot more technology, literate. They understand, the ins and outs of technology, and the expectations are different, right? So from a consumer, you expect different things from your bank, for example, but also as a corporation, you expect more flexibility, the type of deliveries, the timing, so there's a lot of pressure on all of us on that. And the third one is really the acceleration of. We talk about disruption. So Gary has some great examples this morning with Tesla, and I'm sure if you go, people talk about Uber and some of the other models. But the reality is that every single verticals industries today are being disrupted, right? And there's a lot of new startup born out of the cloud, right? So we're very flexible, fast infrastructures, the very pointed and targeted solutions, and and they start to get a lot of traction. So when we come at board level, when we come and we have much longer discussions on these topics, but we always end up which do you want to be the disruptor of the disrupted, right? So clearly everybody don't want to be on the back foot, right? It's how do you start to use technology to lead within your segment. So in terms of observations, right? what we're seeing now, think about these 4 quadrants here, right? And I'm going to have a few more slides to go in more details. I talk about flexibility and agility, speed, speed of execution today. A lot of a line of business, right? Putting a lot of pressures on the IT teams, right? They want to go faster. They want to launch products, faster. They want to be able to develop and evolve, their services, in a different manner, right? And it's interesting because as we sit, through conferences and talks and talk to the non-IT, audience, there's a lot of frustration. But for us, looking at and talking to the IT team, is clear that you cannot evolve quickly enough if you're still running on legacy infrastructures, right? And Gary said this morning again, there's a lot of systems, mainframes that have been deployed 25, 30 years ago, right? And a lot of large companies are still dealing with that, right? So again, that's one of the first thing. And we talk about multi-cloud, right? So multi-cloud is really now how you're going to be able to take your workloads and your applications and move them from one cloud partner to the other one, right? So again, as we talked this morning, it's how do you ensure you don't get locked down in one specific partner, but again, have a flexible infrastructures to move your workloads, either on-prem, off-prem, on a private, or public cloud. We talk about the new entrants, right? And just an example here for financial services. It's, it was really noise, I think, in all industries, right? When new companies come with a new business model, some people smile and, think, that's never going to happen, right? But as things get on, right, they get a foothold and then they start to eat, market share, right? So here's an example of TransferWise, created in 2011. They do international transfer for SMB, right? So I think I was in the press 2 weeks ago. I think they're finally, profitable as a company. So as a business, it took them a few years, but now they're growing, right, accelerating, and they're a profitable business, right? So that's just one example of many, right? And again, if you take every single industries, right, you start to see companies that didn't exist before, right, starting to grab market share. And finally, providing a new customer experience. So I go back to my domain expertise here, right? I was in Boston a few years ago, well, 2 years ago, and I was walking by one of the other banks in the main streets, and I saw, a bank looked like a bank, right? It was, well, at least, in the streets, they all look the same. When I passed by this specific American bank, it was buzzing inside, right? So I went in, and I want to find out actually, using all the latest means of digital assets, digital equipment, dealing with data in a different manner, right? And they having a very agile infrastructure. They completely revamped their branches. And their branches actually now coffee shops, right? So, it's not the original pictures because I didn't have the rights to publish it, but, it's very much like this, right? You had wooden table, you had a baristas, you had the financial advisors in jean and red shirts, right? And, and they're using all the digital means to connect, in the bank, in the portal, with their customers. Very interesting. And what they had some privacy cubicles, right? So if you wanted to have a more private discussions about your financials, right? You could go in these cubes and talk to them. So again, that's very successful. They are growing. And the example here is that we talk about the death of the branches in banking for many, many years, right? And what you'll see is actually, it's not true, right? Some banks are, evolving that, and that's specifically to address this customer engagement part. Now, I'm going to wrap up the first part of my talk, and what's important here when I'm meeting, with companies like yours and our direct customers, when we talk about IT strategy, the reality is, because of the priorities, the intensity of the business, right, that IT teams work, on a 24 to 36 month horizon, right? And yes, people strategize and have a look at where the long-term plan of the company goes. But from an pure IT infrastructures, that doesn't really go much further than that, right? And when I come in and I say, well, I'm going to talk to you about 2, 5, and 15 years, and I want to go that into, established tier one banks, people smile, they're polite, but say, you guys do the microprocessors, we know our own business, right? What do you know about banking in 15 years, right? So I'll share with you about the thought again and where we are. And what we try to do here is really, from an Intel perspective, see where the technology is going, right? And how you can apply it at best and what people do to apply that at best, right? And also it's important for us because if you look at the design cycle of our products, there's probably 10 years plus design cycle, right? So if you look at the microprocessors launching today, they probably are being in the labs being designed 10 years ago. It's amazing, but that's how long it takes for us to design and then, get them into production. So again, the question is, what's your time horizon here, right? So let me go on to three time horizon. The first one is going to be for the next 2 years. And what we've seen from an IT strategy, what a lot of companies have done that, and some of the big, analyst companies got a similar model that you may have seen, right? Intel ourselves, as a large enterprise, we've been applying that now probably since 2007, right? So, and we really focus on these four quadrants: the social, the mobile, the analytic, and cloud. So we started to do cloud at Intel in 2006, 2007. So it's been a long journey already, right? And that worked pretty well, right? It was very much IT-centric. It was great delivery. Our teams were able to show to the business and the executive boards how we were driving better efficiency, better costs, engaging, our customers, in a more efficient manner. But that was not enough, right? And what we've seen now, talking to, large enterprises like ours, but also, companies like yourself, we find that actually the strategies, the 2 to 3 year strategy are really broken down in six pillars, right? And you can see them here, but the first one is really related to what we call on-demand. That's really, an infrastructure discussion, an infrastructure strategy. How do you move from mainframe to cloud infrastructure to an agile infrastructure? Which partners, you're going to go to market with, right? And similarly to, I think the journey that Gary talked about, companies have been evolving over the last 5 or 6 years. The second part is, this is where, is great because all of the work we do, MarkLogic, is fascinating. It's about how you change the game with insight-driven, right? So here again, we look at how do you architect your data? What are the tools you're going to use? What are the key partners? What are the innovative ways to manage, data and extract, as much as you can, right? So clearly, data management has been a challenge, and it's been growing, right? So it's how do you unleash that, moving forward. So great, great party, a lot of work being done. The smart world is everything related to the Internet of Things. I think we can spend a couple of days on that. A lot of things, a lot of new business model, and that I'll show you a couple of models. This is going to change the industries. This is already, and that's going to continue to accelerate. The bottom quadrant, the trusted is really the security strategies. Now, what I, just want you to think here from a security standpoint, think about all the software side, right? So there's many solutions out there, but also all the hardened securities, right? So there's a lot of features that are actually very close to the microprocessors, actually hardened into the platform themselves, right? So, what we get, we suggest people to really think about having this, two-sided approach to security, where you can extract the most from the software side, but also, what are the features that your partners are offering from a hardened a platform perspective. Connected experience, again, is how do you, I'm back to this, this slide of this coffee shop, is how do you provide a better experience, to your customers. There's many ways, and clearly, with many of the industries going digital, right, there's new ways to do that. And finally, from an IT strategy, what we look at, that's more inwards, right? But it's how do you optimize your own IT infrastructures and and enable your workers and your employees to be very efficient, right? Now, what's interesting is this part is sometimes overlooked, right? But it's if you want to attract and retain talent, a lot of the new generations and today's employees are looking at that what tools are you going to give them to be successful? What type of environment are you going to provide to your new employees, right? So at the end of the day, this one is to attract and retain talents is also critical. So when we wrap up this first horizon, right, you got 6 different pillars of work, right? Within each of these pillars, there is a lot of solutions available, right, from partners. And that's usually things that usually you can put in production and deploy today, right? So, that's, yes, there's some work to deploy them, but, you're not in R&D or development here. That's, pretty much ready to go out. So from an Intel perspective, we play in these 6 different quadrants. But what we'll see is really the on-demand, insight-driven, and the security are the one that really everybody is focusing at the moment. Let me move on to Horizon 2, right? So when we go on to the Horizon 2, now we look at technologies that are going to disrupt the industries, right? In the next 3 to 5 years, right? So some of them are going to talk about already exist today, right? But the reality is that it's a lot of R&D. It's in the labs. People looking at how we can deploy them, right? So there's a lot of work being done. They're not prime time. There's probably some production case out there, but it's very, very small. So if you look at the things that myself and my peers across Intel, try to keep a close tab on, right? There's 5 key areas, right? Deep learning, machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence, with the different, evolutions of what that means. That's accelerating, very quickly, and I double click on that, in a minute. I'll talk as well about distributed ledger technology, right? Or blockchain. That's, I think the name that everybody refers today. And then, we see think about this customer engagement, right? And things to do differently. So we see really this rise of the robot advisor, right? It's how technology is going to augment, what humans do, right? And how this is going to start, to work in parallel and deliver new services in parallel. Right? We obviously keep an eye on the startups, right? There is a lot of innovation taking place now. So I didn't ask, who's in financial services across this room? Can you show me a hand of financial services, right? So, okay. So financial services, we talk about fintech, right? When insurance, or we talk about RegTech, the regulation, financial services technology, regulations technology. But what's interesting is most industries now see these startup hubs being created, right? So with a lot of small companies, and it's a great way to innovate, right? So it's interesting because there's multiple, small companies, innovating with very point solutions, right? And for us, it's interesting to see which ones are going to come out of that, and bring some solutions that are going to be deployed, in the long term. And finally, but not least, I've done on the other slide already, but really the Internet of Things, right? Because that's really, there's a lot being talked about, but that's an evolving, I would say, business models and technologies, everything, is always, progressing on the Internet of Things, right? So I'll share with you in the last model, some examples how Internet of Things is going to, for financial services, have an impact, right? But that's really going to change the game, for most of industries. So let me go a bit more on a couple of them. When we talk about machine intelligence and deep learning and artificial intelligence, it's why is it getting prime time? And we're looking at three key components, right? So there are smarter algorithms. There's a lot of work that's being done to optimize the algorithms. There is a lot better hardware, right? If you look today, the compute power and capabilities, microprocessors and the different technologies, you can really crank a lot more data, much faster, right? And then, there is, bigger data. Now, what does that mean, bigger data? Clearly there is a lot more data. There is, smart ways to manage the data now, and there's also, there's new technology on storage, and also on connectivity, right? So think the left side, or think about clearly data and asset management. Think about, all the connectivity which is accelerating. Think about, the storage. You can going to be able to store a lot of data very close to your microprocessors. So the platforms you're going to see in the next, couple of years are going to drastically change, right? So all of that combined together is that this is why you're seeing now a real acceleration of artificial intelligence, right? So everything is coming together very quickly, right? And I think I was reading the press, just a few days ago now that, even machine can learn from each other, right? So, things are really progressing, very fast now in this. So you'll go to keynotes, people start to talk about the fourth, industrial revolution or singularity. I'm not going to talk about that today, but it's, you can see how things are going to go much, much faster and accelerate in the next, 5 to 10 years. Blockchain. Anybody working on blockchain? Anybody? Is that on anybody's radar? No? Right, a few people. All right, so blockchain is, you remember I was talking about cloud here in 2009 with my team? Well, I think that's where blockchain is, right? It's very early days, right? I'm not going to go into all the details, but blockchain is a distributed database, right? And the way you can manage it, Bitcoin is an illustration, an example of what blockchain technology is, right? And when you look at it, it's a very interesting way to create a digital ledger, right, where you cannot, amend the data, right? And financial services, healthcare, government, the automotive segment, pretty much every single industry is looking at on how this is going to have an impact in tomorrow's world, right? Very interesting. There's a lot of technologies and things to overcome. This is what's very much still in R&D. At least in financial services, I always, smile about it. I think, it's a sackable offense if you're in a bank without a blockchain project, right? So I think, most of the banks have that today. But things are moving, right? And, and what you've got hundreds of case studies, at least use cases, very interesting ones. You've got private, public chains, so that's permissionless. A lot of the banks, industries collaborating. The regulators got a view on them, on that. Regulators and government are very open to blockchain as a whole. So again, keep that in mind. I'm wrapping Horizon 2. There's a few things happening, right? And the point here is that it's not prime time, but it's things that you want on your side to start to think about. Things that are going to start to being developed now, that within the next 3 or 4 years will become, real. Okay, let me have a look at the 10, 15 years horizon. What we do at Intel, we look at, we take, regularly do exercise where we look at long-term outlook. We take, anthropologists, we take economists, we take folks from our labs, people like me that vertical, industry experts, and we try to see with a common knowledge of where technology is going, right? Again, all with a premise to see, to help our R&D team to say, okay, this is where, we believe the market is going, and this is the type of technologies we need to develop in the next 10 years. Now, I'm just giving you a few concepts here. It's a much more deeper work, but, we look at, how is that going to change, your business, right? What's going to happen when intelligent machines are going to earn control, right? Means that, they're going to start to make the decisions, right? And, what's going to happen, when if, there is a true end-to-end distributed computing, right? So blockchain is one of the examples, but how is that going to change, the world on that? How is that going to be, we talk about trust, how do humans are going to deal with trusting the machines to make decisions, right? So it's interesting, I was at Monet 2020 in Las Vegas last year, right? And one of the keynote speakers talked about AI and machine learning for financial services, right? And from an auditable, traceable point of view, right? So this gentleman was saying that some of the decisions are going to ingest so much data points, right? But to trace back the decision tree of a decision, right, it will take weeks, right? So at which point, again, us as humans are going to deal with that, what is the governance, how the regulators are going to do that, right? And then, there's a lot of, we call natural interactions with technologies where technology development mimic either what's done in nature or also the other way, how does humans, interact? And there's a lot of new models. VR, for example, is one of them, how we as humans interact with that. That's changing, a few things. So when you start to put all of that in the mix, right, then you start to think about models. So now I'm going to be a bit more financial services, right? That's my area of expertise, so bear with me, right, please. But, we start to think about, models, business models in 15, 20 years, right? So you look at when the bank, become a platform. Think about your employer, right? Your employer doesn't give you a salary anymore, keep your salary, give you a credit cards. If you want your loan from your employer, you can get a loan, you can get a mortgage, you can get student loans, right? So you could see a model where for large companies, right, that could happen, right? Now, your employer will never become a bank, right? So what that means, there's, the banks are going to lose the front interface, right, with the end customers, and they're going to provide back-end services, right, to large companies, right? So if you take today, the Starbucks pay cards is an example, right? I think it's being said that it was one of the biggest mobile payment systems across the Americas, right? Starbucks is not a bank, they don't own the other systems behind that. They use, a financial, partner, a bank in the background to run that, right? So imagine a world, this, what does that mean for that? You need to think about, you got very much an infrastructure discussion. And by the way, this model is going to, in financial services, happen much quicker, right? So there are regulations coming down in Europe in the next 2 years that are going to really open up the banking system. But you need to think about open infrastructure, flexible infrastructures, how you're going to move, your workloads in the cloud, how you're going to provide access to partners onto your data, right? How you're going to secure it, right? So that's an interesting, again, thing to think about, right? Now, at the opposite, so I was saying, you lose, in the first model, you lose your contact with the end customers. In this model, you actually get much, much closer, right? So how do you become a lifestyle company, right, as a bank, right? I always say that, I could portray myself on the social media, I love cars, so I could be with a Porsche and, and put a lot of pictures and people pretend that I'm a Porsche owner, My bank knows actually I drive a Volvo, right? Because I bought a Volvo, I've been servicing my Volvo, for the last 10 years at a Volvo dealer. So it's interesting when you talk to the banks, they've got, very, hard data, right? So on who you are, right? So they've got at least the capabilities, right? It's interesting as part of this conference, how do you use the data? How do you break the silos within an institution, right? And how you can start to secure that and leverage the data behind it, right? But there is a case to be made actually that, a bank can become much closer to you than any of the, social media companies because of what they know about you. You don't lie about your transaction. You can lie about what you say, but, your actually transactions are real, right? Think about KYC. So KYC is know your customers, it's very important in terms of money laundering and fraud, Think about a world now, with technology, we're going to have real-time KYC, 100%, can we get there? 100% accuracy in real-time KYC, Do we need to end up in a data sharing systems between governments, banks, telcos, where, they all cross-share your digital ID, in a secure manner, right? So again, what does that mean from an IT perspective? What does that mean from a data structure? And finally, just an example for capital markets, being in the city, I would have to, capital market, the leading financial place in the world, right, being London, it's, talk about capital markets. Capital markets, if you really simplify it, is information asymmetry, right? It's, I know something you don't, or I know something before you know it, right? So, and then based on this information asymmetry, I can act on it and make a profit, right? So very simply. Now think about a world where everything is getting connected. I talk about the Internet of Things, when you know that your crude oil, everything is, right? All your shipments, your reserves, on real time, put on top of that, an AI engine, or machine learning, and then you see this gap between the information reducing drastically, right? What does that mean for, capital market banks, in the next 10, 15 years? Right, so I'll wrap up. I've got a video I want to show, so I'm going to be short of time, but that's the thing. So you remember when I came in and said, I'm going to talk about 2 years, 5 and 15, 15 sounds like a bit like science fiction, and when I talk to at least the financial services industry at the beginning, they smile. I can assure you at board level, when we finish the discussion, they're very serious, right? Because that's resonates very well. And what happened is, what's key to remember on that is the decisions that you're going to make today in data management, data architectures, in your infrastructures. As Gary said, do you want to be flexible? The decisions that are going to be made today are going to enable or prevent this end state in 15 years, right? So this is why we try to get people to think ahead. It's harder, but think ahead of it. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. Clearly, we're here with, I'll be here later to take your questions. We work very closely with MarkLogic, great solutions as well, very innovative, right? So when you look at, the details of it. And that's about us. What I want to do, I've got 2 more minutes, is that okay? Okay, perfect, right. So I'll talk about enterprise in general. I went a bit more deeply into financial services. I said that Intel looks at how we can drive innovations, in multiple industries, right? And how we can use technology in different manner, right? When I'm going to show a video, it's I don't know if there's any people from the media industry or the sporting industry, right? But it's what we're doing, in the USA with the NBL, right? And how we're going to change the game on how people are going to view sports moving forward, right? So let me play the video for you.
Typically, when fans see it the first time, they don't know what they're seeing, but they know that what they're experiencing is something different.
I've never seen anything like the technology before. It's a gateway into the sport that we just haven't had in the past.
We've been working with Major League Baseball Advanced Media to bring this technology to the All-Star Game.
One cool thing about an All-Star weekend is there's multiple ways that you can showcase the technology. There's a futures game, there's a home run derby, and then there's the All-Star game.
We've set up 28 5K cameras all the way around the stadium.
Each camera has to know that one particular part in space is the same on all these different cameras. Our operators take a virtual camera to fly around the scene to create this really dynamic way of viewing events.
I think one of the things that's incredibly unique about baseball is that there may just be one home run, there may be one pitch, there may be one of these moments that changes the narrative of the game. To see the reaction time, to see micro decision making, turns something that sometimes seems ordinary into spectacular plays.
Where the technology eventually is going to go is to allow the fan to be able to control that image themselves.
We're essentially building a supercomputer in a ballpark. We think Intel has the unbelievable ability to leverage some of the know-how that they have to make that happen.
And you need quite a lot of processing power to bring the audience their replays as soon as possible.
What we really want to do is put fans on the field of play and make them feel as much as they possibly can what it's like to be a player and just see the unbelievable athleticism we have in this game. We're definitely going towards something that we think eventually is going to be the next generation of storytelling for our sport.
And I know that once fans see this and use this, that they're going to be very impressed.
I think one of the things that's incredibly unique about baseball is that there may just be one home run, there may be one pitch, there may be one of these moments that changes the narrative.
Okay, so that's it. So there's a bit of fun for the end, right? That's just one of the things we do on the sideline, and we try to change some of the industries. But again, think about, your horizon 1, 2, 3. What you can do today, and what's coming down, in 3 to 4 years. Real stuff already, and then and try to with your executive teams or yourself think about, where is the industries, where is technology going, and how is it going to impact your business. Thank you very much. Enjoy the end of the rest of the afternoon, and thank you to MarkLogic for your partnership, folks. So thank you.
Just a quick reminder for the feedback, if we could get that. I think, Gerald, you'll be here most of the day,
Yes, I will.
hopefully later on. So if you do have any questions, I'm sure Gerald can answer those. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.